It was a mirage. The merciless sun hung high in the sky, its unrelenting rays beating down upon the desert like a relentless hammer. The sand beneath my boots seemed to radiate heat, each step a struggle against the searing ground. The horizon stretched endlessly, an expanse of rolling dunes that seemed to ripple in the shimmering haze. My throat was a parched desert in itself, aching for even a drop of water. I tried to swallow, but it felt like I was swallowing sandpaper. Panic began to claw at the edges of my mind, a relentless reminder of the perilous situation I found myself in. I squinted against the blinding glare, my eyes straining for any sign of salvation. And then, like a mirage conjured by the desert itself, I saw it, a distant glimmer of blue, a promise of water. Hope surged within me, overriding the fatigue that threatened to drag me down. With renewed determination, I pressed on, my boots sinking into the shifting sands. Each step felt like a monumental effort, but the vision of water danced before me, a beacon of life in the arid wasteland. The sun beat down, casting long distorted shadows that seemed to mock my progress. Hours blurred together, time becoming an abstract concept in the relentless desert. My senses began to play tricks on me, the heat distorting the landscape into surreal, otherworldly shapes. Distant dunes took on the appearance of towering mountains, and the sky seemed to swirl with unnatural hues. I stumbled and fell, the hot sand scalding my skin. The pain was a brutal awakening, a sharp reminder that I teetered on the precipice of something far more dire than exhaustion. I had to find shelter, and soon. As the sun began its descent, casting long, eerie shadows across the dunes, I saw it, a small outcropping of rocks, a potential refuge from the unrelenting elements. With a surge of hope, I pushed forward, my determination eclipsing the gnawing ache of thirst. The rocks loomed closer, their jagged forms a welcome sight, but as I drew nearer, a shiver of unease crawled down my spine. It was as if the rocks themselves were watching me, their shapes contorted into grotesque, leering faces. My breath caught in my throat, my heart pounding in my chest. With a final surge of energy, I reached the shelter of the rocks, their cool surfaces a welcome relief against my fevered skin. I collapsed onto the ground, my body trembling with exhaustion. But as my eyes scanned the shadows, I realized that I was not alone. Figures, shrouded in tattered robes, stood before me, their faces hidden by the encroaching dusk. My pulse quickened, fear coursing through my veins. I tried to speak, to plead for help, but my voice was nothing more than a hoarse whisper. The figures drew closer, their movements deliberate. It was then that I noticed the glint of steel in their hands, the moonlight glimmering off the blades. Panic surged through me, a surge of adrenaline coursing through my veins. In that desperate moment, survival instincts kicked in. With a burst of strength I didn't know I possessed, I scrambled to my feet and fled into the desert night. The rocks, once a sanctuary, now felt like a prison, their looming forms closing in around me. I ran, my legs pumping, the sand shifting beneath me. The night air was a welcome balm against my overheated skin, but I knew I couldn't stop. The figures pursued me, their presence a looming spectre in the darkness. And then, just when I thought I couldn't go on, I saw it, a faint glimmer on the horizon. It was real this time, a genuine oasis, a sanctuary from the horrors that pursued me. With a final surge of energy, I pushed forward, the promise of water and safety driving me onward. As I stumbled into the oasis, my body collapsing onto the cool, damp earth, I knew I had cheated death. The water was a balm against my parched throat, a lifeline in the unforgiving desert. And as I looked back at the fading figures in the distance, I knew that I had faced something far more terrifying than the desert itself. It was a mirage, yes, but the true horror lay not in the tricks played by the desert, but in the darkness that lurked within the human heart. The figures, the threat they posed, were all too real, a stark reminder that sometimes the greatest dangers are the ones we can't see coming. Dried up death. I never imagined that I'd find myself in this godforsaken desert, with the relentless sun beating down on me like a merciless executioner. But here I am, miles away from civilization, with nothing but a dwindling water supply and my desperate thoughts for company. The day I set out on this ill-fated adventure, I couldn't have anticipated the horrors that would await me. It all started so innocently, a spur-of-the-moment decision to explore the barren beauty of the desert, seeking solace and an escape from the mundane routine of life. I thought I was prepared, but the desert had other plans. As I trudged through the seemingly endless dunes, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The stillness of the desert was deafening, and every step I took echoed through the desolation. I remember telling myself that it was just my imagination running wild, but something in the pit of my stomach told me otherwise. The first day passed relatively uneventfully. I rationed my water, sipping it sparingly, and felt a flicker of hope as the sun dipped below the horizon. The desert took on a different personality at night, the air cooling and the stars shimmering in the sky. I wrapped myself in my sleeping bag, praying for a peaceful rest. Morning came too quickly, and with it, the realization that I was already disoriented. The landscape offered no clear markers, no distinguishable features to guide my way. Panic set in, and I cursed myself for my impulsive decision to embark on this journey. How could I have been so naive? My canteen felt lighter with each passing hour, and my throat grew parched and raw. It was as though the desert was leeching the life out of me, sucking away my vitality like a vampiric force. I stumbled on, each step feeling heavier than the last. The sun was relentless, a fiery demon in the sky that showed no mercy. My skin felt like it was sizzling, and I could feel the onset of heat stroke. Delirium began to creep in, and I thought I heard whispers on the wind, haunting voices carried by the desert's breath. My mind played tricks on me, conjuring mirages of water shimmering in the distance. Desperation forced me to chase these illusions, only to have them vanish as I drew near. I couldn't trust my senses anymore, and I had no one to talk to but myself. I began to bargain with my own mind. Just a little further, I'd whisper to myself, convincing my weakening body to keep moving. I imagined rivers, ice cold and clear, and felt the coolness of the water running down my throat. It was a cruel game my mind played, offering me respite in a world devoid of it. As the days passed, my strength waned, and my canteen was nearly empty. My lips cracked, and my tongue felt like sandpaper. My skin was sunburned and blistered, and I knew that I was slowly dying, but I refused to accept it. I couldn't let myself believe that this desolate place would be my final resting ground. The nights brought no relief either. The desert had a way of turning frigid after dark, and I huddled in my sleeping bag, shivering from both the cold and fear. I was haunted by dreams of water, dreams that teased and tantalized. Each morning, I awoke with a bitter taste of disappointment, knowing that I had been deceived once again. And then, on what I believed to be the brink of death, something extraordinary happened. I stumbled upon a dilapidated shack, half buried in the sand. My heart leaped with hope, and I struggled to reach it, each step an agonizing effort. The door creaked open with a reluctant groan, and inside, I found a source of salvation, a stash of water bottles and canned food. I gorged on water, feeling the life trickle back into my dehydrated body. It was a miracle, a beacon of hope in the midst of this desolation. As I sat there, drinking greedily, a sense of dread gnawed at the back of my mind. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched again, that this sanctuary was too good to be true. And then, I noticed it, a faint, eerie sound, like a distant whisper. It was coming from outside, and my curiosity got the better of me. I stepped out cautiously, peering into the vast, unforgiving desert. And there, in the distance, I saw them. Figures, silhouettes of people, standing like sentinels in the dunes. They were motionless, their features obscured by the relentless glare of the sun. But I could feel their eyes on me, their collective gaze piercing through my soul. I shuddered with a mixture of fear and confusion. "What do you want?" I called out to them, my voice wavering. No answer came. They remained unmoving, like statues of dread. I realized then that I had stumbled upon something far more sinister than the desert itself. I had walked into a trap, a malevolent mirage that had lured me in with the promise of salvation. I was not alone out here, and the presence of these silent figures filled me with a terror I could hardly comprehend. In a moment of sheer desperation, I turned and ran, leaving the shack and its tainted bounty behind. My canteen was once again running dry, and the whispers in the wind seemed to grow louder, more insistent. The desert had become a living, breathing entity, a malevolent force that sought to claim me for its own. I continued to walk aimlessly through the endless dunes, never looking back. My only company now was the unrelenting sun and the ever-present whispers. My mind had become a battleground of hope and despair, and I couldn't be sure which side was winning. As I trudged onward, I couldn't escape the feeling that the desert was closing in on me, that the very sand beneath my feet was conspiring to bury me alive. I was lost, both in body and in mind, and the cruel irony of my situation was not lost on me. I had escaped the clutches of dehydration, only to fall prey to something far more sinister. The desert had not only drained my body of water, but had also begun to consume my sanity. As I stumbled through the desolation, I couldn't help but wonder if I was already too late, if I had crossed a line from which there was no return. And so, I continue to walk, driven by a flicker of hope and the fear of what lies behind me. The desert stretches on endlessly, an unforgiving expanse that shows no mercy. In this barren wasteland, I am but a lost soul, a victim of my own foolishness, and a pawn in a sinister game played by forces I cannot comprehend. As I trudge on, I know one thing for certain: the desert is not done with me yet, and my battle for survival has only just begun. Dunes of illusion. All right, settle in, because I'm about to spin you a tale that'll make your skin crawl. It all started out in those unforgiving dunes, where the very sand seemed to play tricks on the mind. You think it's just sand, right? But out there, in that scorching expanse, it's a whole different ball game. It's like nature itself has a vendetta. I was trekking through those dunes, the sun beating down like it had a personal grudge. Every step felt like lifting a lead weight. I kept my eyes on the horizon, hoping for a sign of something, anything, but all I got was endless waves of sand, rising and falling like a cruel joke. The day turned to night, and the desert transformed. The temperature plummeted, and I huddled in my thin sleeping bag, shivering like a leaf. The dunes took on eerie shapes in the moonlight, like hunched creatures waiting to pounce. It was in those dark hours that I first heard it, a distant, haunting wail, like a lament carried on the wind. My heart raced, and I scanned the darkness, searching for the source of the sound. But there was nothing, just me and the dunes, playing tricks on my senses. I tried to convince myself it was a mirage, a figment of my exhausted mind, but the unease settled deep in my bones. Morning came, but with it, a sense of disorientation. The dunes seemed to shift in the night, rearranging themselves like a malevolent puzzle. I felt like a lost soul in a shifting maze, every step taking me further from where I thought I should be. The water in my canteen was dwindling, and my mouth was drier than the desert itself. I knew I needed to find civilization, and fast. My mind started to play tricks on me, shapes in the distance, shadows in the dunes. I'd stumble towards them, only to find emptiness. And then, just when I thought I couldn't go on, I saw it, a small structure half buried in the sand. Hope surged within me, propelling me forward. It was a shack, weathered and beaten, but it promised shelter. I stumbled inside, my breath racked with anticipation. The interior was sparse, a layer of dust covering every surface, but it offered respite from the unrelenting sun. I collapsed onto a warm cot, feeling the weight of exhaustion settle over me like a suffocating blanket. As I lay there, the shack seemed to come alive with whispers, faint, indistinct voices that seemed to echo off the walls. I shot up, my heart pounding, but there was nothing to be seen. Just the empty room, the silence pressing in around me. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was just the wind playing tricks, but my nerves were shot. I needed to get out of there, find my way back to civilization. I pushed through the door and back into the blinding sunlight, determined to put the shack and its whispers behind me. The dunes stretched out in all directions, an unending sea of sand. I picked a direction and started walking, my throat burning with thirst. Hours passed, each step a struggle, and still there was no sign of rescue. And then, just when I thought I was truly alone, I heard it again, the wail, carried on the wind like a mournful cry. It was closer this time, more distinct. My heart raced, and I scanned the horizon, desperate for any sign of life. And there, on the crest of a dune, I saw them, figures, silhouettes against the relentless sun. They stood like sentinels, unmoving, their features hidden in shadow. My breath caught in my throat. Were they real, or just another cruel trick of the desert? I stumbled towards them, my legs heavy and uncooperative. As I drew closer, I could make out details, the tattered clothes, the sunken eyes. They looked like lost souls, trapped in this unforgiving wasteland. My heart ached for them, but I knew I couldn't save them. I could barely save myself. And then, as I reached the top of the dune, I froze. The figures were gone, vanished like specters in the wind. I was alone again, surrounded by nothing but sand and silence. It was then that I knew. The desert was playing games with me, weaving illusions to toy with my sanity. It wanted to break me, to leave me wandering in this barren expanse forever. But I wasn't about to let that happen. With a newfound determination, I turned and pushed forward, every step a defiant declaration. I would find my way out of this desert, out of this nightmare. Hours turned to days, and still I pressed on. The whispers grew louder, the dunes more treacherous, but I refused to give in. I was a survivor, and I would make it out of here. And then, just when I thought I couldn't go on, I saw it, a glimmer of civilization on the horizon. It was real, this time. A mirage turned tangible, a sign that I was almost free. I stumbled towards it, my body battered and bruised, but my spirit unbroken. I had faced the illusions of the desert and come out the other side. I was alive, and I was going to make it. So, my friend, remember this: when you find yourself in the dunes of illusion, keep your wits about you. The desert may try to play tricks, but you've got something it doesn't expect, a will to survive that's stronger than any mirage.